And back to devlogs. Being in nature has restored my sanity. I am mostly done playing Armored Core 6. This is a lie, GOTY 2023. But more importantly, I am back to working on my game. Not working on a GDScript LSP and no more quote-unquote trying out Neovin. I'll share my thoughts on both at the end. For now, I'm back on the straight and narrow to the pearly gates, Emacs, and using C++ to do some bespoke bitwise operations. This is devlog number 27, and let's get down to brass tacks. So I am now done with the primary weapon prototyping. As I said previously, I've spitballed a number of possible weapons I'd like to implement, and I chose 3 that I thought would be the quote-unquote extremes, in that together they bound the implementation space, and having very rudimentarily implemented them, I think they sure do. So for now I have a Gatling gun, a katana, which animations I'm not happy with, and something that shoots AoE projectiles. It should be self-evident by how many times I've used the words prototyping, primary, unhappy, and rudimentarily that everything is clearly far away from being final. Still, no sound of course. I used these 3 as a nice little foray into Godot's animation system, and I gotta say, I prefer to Unreal's. It's super easy to add custom tracks to animations, which means it's easy peasy method calls. It's great from a solo dev's point of view, and it makes things super easy to iterate on. Also, I tried out writing shaders for Godot. I had something that was a little too complicated for the built-in shader graph, so I got down and dirty with Godot shaders. Godot's shader language is basically GLSL, so if you're used to writing shaders using that, or you've written shaders for Unity back before they developed a new render pipeline every month, you should feel right at home. I've only written 2 so far, the one for the zappy ball here, and the shader for this ammo pickup, but having written my fair share of HLSL, it's a smooth transition to GD shader. Both of these are probably a little too cell shaded for the ultimate look that I'm going for, but I do think all pickups will probably be more stylized so they can pop against the game world, so something akin to the ammo pickup might stick around. Now, the only downside about writing shaders is, yeah, it's a lot of fun, but I just find myself fiddling with them forever. They really are a huge waste of time when I should be working on more important stuff. Stuff like enemies. I resisted the intrusive thoughts telling me to polish movement to an atomically perfect mirror-like sheen, and I will later. I can't stay strong forever, but the table stakes for enemies is navigation. Shooting fish in a barrel gets kind of boring pretty quickly after all. While I ended up extending Godot with some custom C++ to do some basic physics hacks and debugging, this is where I knew ahead of time I was going to have to write some good old C++. While Godot has pathfinding mesh for characters that walk on the ground that I am perfectly happy with. You know me, I'm always trying to do extra when I probably should not. I'm talking flying enemies that actually fly. While I've successfully used voids in the past, I'm going to try Octrees again, but this time I swear more thoroughly. Also more simply because I'm not planning on spinning the game world, and I'm not planning on having enemies that can pathfind along walls. So again, just the volume each octant bounds instead of the surfaces as well. So far I've just implemented my Octree, and let me tell you, I like this Octree much more than my previous Octree. Again, just like a nav mesh, I'm planning for this to be baked ahead of time, but instead of having each octant iterate over every other octant to find its neighbor in order to generate a graph for pathfinding, I've used my girthy and powerful brain to use the tree structure itself to find neighbors, even for octants that aren't siblings of each other. Now, I haven't tested it quite yet. I'm still getting distracted by Armored Core 6 after all, and since I'm doing a bunch of bitwise operations, it's probably a coin flip if I got it right first try, but I'm confident I can debug it so that way I don't have to brute force the traversal graph generation, which is going to make it so much easier to bake. Also, the nice thing of having this Octree is that I already have some real powerful functions for raycasting and finding the nearest octant and finding the nearest empty octant, which, oh my gosh, whew. This is hot. I also went hyper autism mode. Not actually autism, I'm just too stupid for standard containers. I wrote my own queue and priority queue classes, which, by the way, look at the structure for my priority queue. Oh yeah, it's a binary tree instead. That, ooh, boy. One of these days I'll do an episode on bitwise operation and another on the application of different data structures, because ooh, this stuff, along with allocating memory by hand, this is what makes me feel alive. So my thoughts on a GDScript LSP that uses standard I/O instead of ports. It's totally doable, but I was doing things the hard way. Like all other midwits, I thought I was being clever, but really I just underestimated the scope of the problem and got a little too big for my britches. As we can see in these ballooning sconstruct files, I was trying to rebuild Godot, but just the LSP bits, which quickly turned into just rebuilding all of Godot, but making it headless and having it read and write from standard I/O instead of using ports, which kinda defeats the point. And then that became an annoying problem of an endless cycle of trying to build it, adding in more modules in order to build it, and so on and so forth. Very slow and painful iteration. I'm going to continue with this project, but on the back burner, and I think the answer is regular expressions. Regex is based. I got my start writing web scrapers that used regex, and yeah, I'm dating myself here, and I should have never looked back on my proud heritage. While APIs come and go, regex is eternal. I don't regret my initial approach since I actually learned a lot about how Godot works under the hood, but I do regret how long I spent on it. Ultimately, I think it's totally feasible. After all, you can just use dump extension API with docs and get a handy dandy JSON file with all the built-in types, classes, methods, enums, etc. Prime for regex parsing. After that, there's also the issue of user scripts and user GD extension code. Oddly enough, I think the GD extension code will also be easy to scrape since C++ is just so well formed, and I know the methods and macros that are used to extend the Godot source code. Yes, this would mean loading the properly parsed version of an over 32,000 line JSON file, but I can have some RAM as a treat. Also, I'm done trying out NeoVim. I'm still going to use it, but only on my laptop because it's just that old. I think NeoVim is good, but for some nitpicky reasons, I prefer Emacs. I use evil mode, so movement is exactly the same between the two. Cycling between buffers preserves order in Emacs, and I use it all the time to switch buffers, but it's a no-go with NeoVim. Switching between source and header files is a built-in function for Emacs, but in NeoVim, it's just an LSP feature. I actually prefer Dired to all of the directory editors I tried out with NeoVim, and that includes Oil. Dired just does everything and more since it's also like Midnight Commander. Compiling in Emacs is asynchronous by default, and it integrates amazingly with Projectile, so it can detect the build system you're using for a project instead of having to set make purge every time. Smart Parens is hands down better than any auto pairing package NeoVim has, since it lets you move backwards and forward across balanced expressions, which, look at this footage. Look at the speed in insert mode. Tramp is based, and I think that if you have Vertigo and Marginalia, Emacs help is miles better than NeoVim's help and makes learning Emacs and ELIS easy. Now, Telescope is nice, but it's limited by what you can use it to fuzzy find, whereas Vertigo adds fuzzy finding to everything. Emacs's modal structure is great. I can actually change keybinds in Dired, but I can't with NetRW, and ultimately, I like how Emacs really is completely hackable since it is a read, evaluate, print loop first and a text editor second, whereas I hit the limits of what I could do with NeoVim's Lua API, and I still have VimScript PTSD. So, does Emacs flagrantly violate the Unix philosophy? Hell yeah it does, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Again, I'm going to continue using NeoVim on my laptops since it has 8 gigs of RAM and a 2010 chipset, so it is the context in which NeoVim really shines. I ended up with what I think is a pretty lean and mean NeoVim config. I've uploaded it to my GitHub, so if you're interested, you can check it out. Tim Pope is still the GOAT, and sidebar file trees are dumb, and I stopped using them. But if you put a gun to my head and made me use one, I would have it on the right side instead of the left. And that's it for this episode. As always, thank you for watching. I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good day. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and if you want to follow along with whatever I do next, be it devlog or a video on Bitwise operations like I teased earlier, please subscribe. If I'm not out camping, I try to read all your comments. Otherwise, I'll get to them as I churn through the backlog. Whatever the case, I do appreciate them. I'm on Twitter. I don't post much, but as I said in the past, I'm good for a follow back, and I occasionally like and retweet when I do find myself on Mr. Musk's social platform. There's also a Discord server for the channel where you can chat about math, game dev, or whatever. It's pretty chill and everyone in it is friendly. I haven't been baking much lately because too hot to turn on an oven. But now that we're finally in autumn, I'll be getting back into the swing of things and posting my bakes on the server right when I pop them out of the oven. But speaking of baking, let's get to it. So this is pretty monumental. This is Shokupan because, well, I decided this is my first attempt at Shokupan, as you can tell from the picture. The top, not that good. But yeah, this is monumental because this is the first thing I baked after coming back from Japan. Again, if you're interested in my trip to Japan back in 2023, I posted a bread review video of Japan because, you know, this is gotta stay on brand here. I almost said on bread here, my god. But yeah, Shokupan. And honestly, you know, Shokupan, you know, just compared to like white bread here in America, Shokupan is better. It really is just better. I mean, I understand why people go over there and they're just wowed by the bread because, again, you're not going to get crusty bread in Japan. You're going to get soft bread, and Shokupan is just incredibly pillowy. So this is my first try, and again, I actually got the proper Pullman tin for it because that's how you get the extra square shape. This is the first one I tried, and I don't think I put the cover on the tin, but if you look at the crumb here, again, it's super soft, it's super billowy. Pillowy, not billowy, God. The recipe I used said to add an egg, so that's why it's kind of this nice pastel yellow, maybe even pale yellow color. But so first attempt, again, kind of goofy shape, still delicious. Everybody I gave it to loved it, and I was eating sandwiches for a while, and you know, I'll show another picture from my Japan trip. Oh man, one of my favorite things I made over. Well, we were staying in hostels the entire time, and like they were like, compared to what like honestly, like for the Japanese hostels, we spent like around I averaged $20 USD a night, and they're great hostels. They're super clean. I mean, yeah, you had to share a bedroom. That's fine, but you know what I like about hostels, as like, you know, a cook, is there's a kitchen. Yeah, it's communal. The pots and the pans aren't going to be, you know, the great stuff, but you get to cook. And so I made one of my favorite breakfasts there was I just made the eggs. I made scrambled eggs, and I would put it on a piece of Shokupan, and I would have that for breakfast at the hostels because I would get to someplace new. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go buy some eggs. You know, I'd get like a half dozen eggs. You know, I'd have 1 or 2 eggs for breakfast, and then you know, for at the hostels for dinner, I'd have 1 or 2 more. I'd make some eggs for my friends I was traveling with. So you know, by the time we're leaving, well, you know, we'd be done with the eggs, and so everything would work out. And if you don't, like, you just leave it for other hostel people. It's like, hey, you just write free or gratis, wherever you are, gratis, huh? And you know, hey, you gotta the cycle continues. So yeah, that's one of the things I actually cooked in Japan is Shokupan with scrambled eggs. So got back stateside. I'm like, you know what I want? I want my Shokupan with scrambled eggs. So again, I enjoyed having this with scrambled eggs. It was delicious. But again, I didn't get that perfect shape. So, you know, had to try again. Had to. And look at this time. Ooh. It's not even out of the tin, and it's looking good. Square on top, it's all square. Oh, look at this. Perfect. Look at that rectangular prism. Ignore those bananas in the background. I eat those. That's my pre-workout. My pre-workout is just bananas and creatine and some L-citrulline malate and caffeine, and that's my pre-workout. So those bananas, they're vital. But look at this perfect rectangular prism, beautiful. And look at that, cross section, gorgeous Shokupan. And yeah, I mean, Shokupan, I can see why it's popular. It is great, and and yeah, it was so yeah, I was real happy with the Shokupan here. I haven't made it lately because again, I am just, you know, I'm a sourdough / focaccia fanatic. I am a crusty man, so I like a crusty bread. Shokupan's just a little, a little too soft. But I should make Shokupan again. I really should. I might just. But again, Shokupan. But yeah, it was good, and it's easy. I mean, as long as you have a Pullman tin, which is that long rectangular tin you saw earlier, and get the non-stick version. Otherwise, you're gonna lose your mind. This is the only non-stick thing I actually have. Everything. I'm not a fan of non-stick otherwise, especially for cookware. Like, my God, I'm not a fan of non-stick, and it's not just because of the chemicals. It's mostly because it goes bad after a month or two. That's my thoughts on non-stick. But back to bread, I did use yeast in this, so I can use the classic sign-off without a sense of guilt. The yeast in the air is free, so go out there and bake. It's delicious, it's nutritious, it's good for you, and it makes a great gift. So it's a really good way to show people that you appreciate them. And I appreciate all of you. Thank you, and I will see you next time.